All right, Jamie Shopland, candidate for County Council District 2 in Frederick County. Jamie, thank you for doing this. What's your passion?
It is a pleasure, and thank you for the time. So my passion is servant leadership, and that harkens back to my experience as a brownie in Girl Scouts, where I learned at a very early age the importance of leaving things better than you found them. And I've taken that into my career, working with my colleagues and helping them understand what servant leadership looks like. And my hope and my goal is to model that behavior for my daughters, so my 7-year-old twins who attend Centerville Elementary and are two little humans that I learn so much from every day. And, it's just important to me to show up and to give back because we have a lot of opportunities to shape our future and where we go, and I want to be part of that.
So you said the brownies, right? I know that you're like me, you're a longtime Frederick person, grew up around here. So what kept you here?
Well, I'm actually from Indiana.
Okay.
So I've been here, though, a little over 19 years, 20 years this November, which is when I'll celebrate my 20th wedding anniversary.
Okay.
So I am originally from Indiana, though, and I grew up on the east side of Indianapolis in a very diverse community. I was the minority in my classroom, and then I moved to the west side of Indianapolis in elementary school, and that was a very different experience. It was much more rural. So I saw both sides of those coins at a very early age and kind of what those different communities look like. But the thing that brought me here is my husband. And so I met him while he was creating some federal government contracts. So right out of high school, I was getting connected into a federal government call center. And so he was starting up one for the Federal Trade Commission. And I got a very early sort of exposure to government knowledge, service, and just helping people navigate the diverse, I don't know, whatever the word is. It's very complicated federal government system.
So I grew up here, and I've only visited Indianapolis.
Okay.
Right, so the opposite. And I will never forget the first time I was there. I was there for some conference, in the big hall there, and I'm in the hotel. I go downstairs. I walk across the street to the Starbucks. I get some coffee. I walk back to the hotel. 8 a.m. on like a Tuesday. 0 cars. And I just remember thinking, like, where is everybody? Because I grew up here, which is even in little, even with Frederick as small as it was when I was growing up, at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday, there's 1,000 cars.
Right.
And so it's such a. I was told that it swells, Indianapolis 500 comes in and there's, 1 million people.
Yeah, a lot of people.
And then the rest of the time there's like no one in the city. So how was that? I must have been a shock moving here and just having way more people.
Yeah. Well, one of the great things Indianapolis has is a great bus system, the Indigo bus system. So maybe that was part of why you didn't see as many cars on the road. But it was, a bit of a culture shock moving here. So I like to say I brought some Hoosier hospitality to Maryland because in Indiana and where I'm from, a little town called Avon or Plainfield or Danville, those are small towns on the west side of Indianapolis. People make eye contact. They ask you how you're doing. You're at the grocery store, and it's much more friendly. And so here is definitely that East Coast vibe where people are just, they're on their way, they're busy, and there's not a lot of small talk. And so that was very different. It was also very different when I had an interview for the Federal Trade Commission and took the Metro for the very first time. And that, I have to be honest, was terrifying. Coming from a small town in Indiana and then getting on this very confusing Metro system. My husband did not prepare me with any directions. I was trying to figure out, how do I pay for this thing? Which direction do I go? What even is the red line? And, since then I've taken it for lots of different reasons. And I really admire public transportation and work for Amtrak, which is a passenger rail company. And so that's what I do currently.
It does seem to me that Indianapolis, because when I was there, because actually I've also been up for the Indianapolis 500, and I've ridden the bus up there a little bit. It does seem like they invested much more and much earlier. We are, a lot of these conversations circle around this idea of a changing generation. Like your kids are not going to be like us in that they like. I think I've said it 100 times. Sorry, but like as soon as I was 15 and 9 months or whatever it was, I had my permit.
Yep.
And like my 16th birthday, like part of the day was me going and getting my driver's license.
Right.
I fully accept having the ability to drive and the privilege and the opportunity that was. Not everybody has that, but we all wanted it.
Right.
And that the next generation doesn't feel that way. And some places like Indianapolis have kind of thought about that. And I feel like Maryland, Frederick has not thought about that as much. I'm so happy that transit is free, and it is free. Transit's free. I'm very happy about that. But do you think that that's something we should be investing more in?
Yeah, I would love for it to come more to the south part of the county, Urbana and Newmarket. And I've heard from folks that I've talked to. An 18-year-old in Newmarket reached out and said, hey, do you think and do you support getting the bus service down here? I spoke at senior seminar at Hood College. I'm a proud alum of Hood College, and they want it to be able to get easier from downtown Frederick to Montgomery County and on to D.C. for whatever they have going on. So lots of young folks do seem to be focusing on public transportation, and I see the scooters zooming around my neighborhood everywhere. Right? We didn't have that growing up. Bicycle was how I got around. I would ride to Wendy's, I would ride to Dairy Queen, and as long as I was home by sundown and the street lights coming on, that was life back then, and it is very different. So it's different when you think about driver's license in Indiana because that was a huge milestone, and getting your learner's permit. But here, kids they don't want to have a driver's license. Yeah. And in Indiana, the streets are more grid structure. Here, there's a lot of topology, right? The roads are different. People they're in Indiana, everybody that's in the left lane, everybody knows that's the fast lane. Here you don't have that set up. So it's a very different dynamic that I noticed when I moved here. So yeah, it's interesting to see how things are changing, across generation.
So one of my big complaints, and please, I know that you work inside of Amtrak, so if you could talk to whoever is there about this, is the fact that we just don't have as much access here in Frederick, that we don't have as many trains. And I tried to, somebody was complaining about this, and I sat on TSAC a long time ago, so this is kind of my wheelhouse, and I was explaining that it's because they own the tracks, and that coal and other materials pay a lot more than a person in a chair. So how do we overcome that economic, because again, it's not in the company's best interest, and I'm not want you to speak on their behalf, but in general, that it is not going to create as much profit to get people up and down.
Yeah.
But we really we are big enough at a point where we need to have that rail access from Frederick down to D.C., just how transformative that would be. Is that something that you think the county could make happen, something like in our lifetime? Is that going to happen, or am I just... So just accept it?
You're one of the few people that know that Amtrak, and I'm not here speaking on behalf of Amtrak, just to be very clear, but you do know that Amtrak doesn't own or control its own destiny. Yeah. We own most of the track on the Northeast Corridor, but all of the state-supported or the long distance, we have to work with other railroads to leverage those and to get passenger on those rails. The other thing that adds complexity is that we are 10 years out from getting new trains on the tracks, right? It's just a long lead time to get new equipment serviced and ready and tested and approved by federal regulators to get those trains in service. And Amtrak's doing that right now. It's publicly known, right? The next gen Acela, we have a new Aero fleet that's coming out. Locally, though, the MARC service is increasing its frequency it's still going to take 3 to 5 years. These big infrastructure initiatives are very worthwhile. They just take a long time. And there's so many people involved, right?
Yeah. I guess my question is that it seems to me that the conversation is all around widening 270.
Yeah.
Or it's all around how do we get more cars from there down.
Yeah.
I know there's been discussion about dedicated bus lanes and as a solution too. But I think rail is really the actual solution. And so
I would be a
accept
strong
the
advocate
answer.
for that. A lot of those decisions are not made by the county council, right? So you have to work with state partners, federal partners, and it depends on who owns, if there's existing rail infrastructure, who owns that, right? And freight, to your point, is much, they sort of run over passenger rail, right? Because they have a bigger lobbying existence. And so there's this, even though there's federal legislation that says passenger rail is supposed to be given preference, that doesn't bear out. So there is a resurgence in rail from what I'm seeing, given where I work, and that's a really exciting thing. But we have to make sure we have folks that can create those partnerships and influence the folks that are making these decisions, because it's not really a county council decision, unfortunately.
So perhaps that's my question. I understand you're not going to make a decision that is extra MART trains.
Sure.
But is it the role of the county council to go and lobby for that, to go be in Annapolis and be in D.C. having these conversations?
I would say yes. If there are residents in District 2, if I have the privilege to represent them and they're asking for more rail service, they're asking for multimodal options, then I should be going and talking to the decision makers and understanding what's getting in the way of this. And then how, as a county, does that become a priority? Is it connected back into our Livable Frederick plan, right? And the 5-year update that came out about the Livable Frederick plan sometime last year, I was happy to see that it was reflecting a shift to multimodal transportation, right? So, all the environmental impacts, the accessibility is a huge factor in my life as a mom of a kid with a disability, right? So I'm looking at it through this lens. Also, she's never going to be able to drive a car, most likely. So she's going to need public transportation with assistance to get around to wherever she might want to go.
I had a wonderful conversation with a woman named Eileen Dixon, who was, when she turned 20, she became blind.
Oh, I know her. I've met her a couple of times.
She's amazing.
Yeah.
And, just the tiniest bit of her story that she became blind. She was going to be a nurse, and they said, well, you can't be a nurse anymore. It's too, the liable is there.
Yep.
And so she said, well, what should I do? And they said, oh, go do laundry in a hotel basement or something. And she said, they wanted me to disappear. She said, forget that.
Yeah.
And she called the Maryland School for the Miss Maryland pageant and said, I'm going to compete.
Yeah.
They said, we've never had a blind person. And she's like, I don't care. I'm showing up.
Right.
So that amazing person. So setting the stage. So I was having a conversation with her about accessibility being so often it is a thing that we design a space, or we design the way that we as residents are going to interact with transportation or our city or our county. And then we go, all right, well, now let's make it accessible. And how it really needs to be the first design step is that accessibility.
Right.
Because, and she put it so well, that disability is the only, it's like the only thing that you can become.
That's right.
Right?
Everybody is a fall or a diagnosis away from having a disability or being a person with a disability. And so we do need to design society in mind for that. So some of the principles that I focus on at work, and the kind of work that I do is lead people through change. And we talk about human-centered design. So if we think about the different conditions of a human and the different abilities of a human, we need to be thinking about folks who have disabilities, and those could be kids, those could be senior citizens, right? And having not just more awareness around what those different types of disabilities are, but starting with that in mind. That universal design is something that's talked about in terms of how you design infrastructure, right? There's the Americans with Disabilities Act, and that is something that's still being implemented, but it's been around for a long time now, but we're still trying to figure out how to meet those requirements with curb cuts. And my daughter goes to Centerville, and she doesn't have a button that she can push to open the door. She can't open the door herself. Why is that the case today?
I think change is a big part of it. You talked about navigating people through change, that it is we and humans, we're creatures of habit, that we don't want, even if it's negative, like even if we're there's pain or we're being punished for the the reality. We don't want it to change because it's like we understand it, and change is scarier. And I can definitely, I mean, obviously this goes all the way back to millions of years ago where things we didn't understand were going to eat you, right? So I get it. Like I get why our brains do that to us. But how, I mean, you're running for public office, right? In a moment there is so much change, that exponential, growth and change in our society that, I think back to our childhood, and it was, a year on a year wasn't that different. Whereas now I can't even, what I'm doing in business today is not what I'm going to be doing a year from now in the restaurant in the world, in the heating air conditioning world. It's just completely different.
Sure.
So you're running for office, right? You're going to have to make decisions that people are going to be very either happy with or upset about, because you're going to be changing things. So how do you have that as you're navigating this? How do you have that conversation with people about, I don't know, how do you sell them on change, I guess is...
Well, yeah, and I don't think it's necessarily selling somebody on change. It's important for people to understand the why, right? And that's where I think we kind of get this wrong in some ways, right? People are there. You're going to have those early adopters, the first people that got the Apple Watch, right? Those are the people that are on the forefront. They have that foresight. They want to be part of that,
and the resources,
that change, and they probably have the means and whatever. And then you have folks that are very perfectly fine with how things are, right? And then there are going to be people that are just, you're never going to sort of get them to understand your why. So I spend a lot of time trying to help people understand why things are changing. And so a lot of what my campaign is about and my leadership style is about is to have those collaborative, community-focused conversations, bring people together, have facilitated conversations around, what is the problem that we're trying to solve? We are often jumping to solutions without defining the problem statement properly. So a problem well stated is a problem half solved. And so we've got to understand what problems we're solving, and we have to help people understand why we need to solve these problems. And the only way that I've known how to do that is to get people in a room and talk it out and have some structure to that conversation. So one of the first listening sessions that I had was over at the Urbana Library. We had Post-it notes, we had Sharpies, and I said, what are your hopes? What are your fears? And through that, I was able to get some meaningful insight into what is on the minds of folks that came out to that session. And from there, we can then start having conversations and figure out what do we need to solve for.
I've become pretty convinced that it's the in-person conversations are, that so much of our world we've just been destroyed by social media and this ability to just not be in a room with another person, not just from the political discourse side, but just from the how do you work through, even if you agree, how do you work through a problem if you're not standing there together and having it? And I know, Zoom and, these other things, they're just simply not a human being and another human being expressing what they feel and how to get through something.
Right.
So how do you, because I think, for example, there's a lot of decisions that are made that when we start to see the results of that decision is years later, right? So a decision is made on zoning, or a decision is made on a plot of land, or a decision is made inside of some legislation about a policy. And then years later, we see something being built right next to my house, and I go, oh my God, what is this, right? But the time to complain about it was 2 years ago, because there just isn't a lot of people in the room.
Right.
So how can you solve that for us? How do we solve it? Because
I alone cannot. But
so the listening session's great, but
yeah.
I'm assuming, because I go to a lot of these, that there wasn't 800 people in the room.
No,
right?
There was about 7 or 8.
Yeah. So which is awesome that these people are taking their time to do that, but there are 300,000 plus people in the county, right? So that's not an actual.
It's not a representative sample of.
So how do you get to that representative sample?
Yeah, I think it takes a multi-pronged two-pronged approach. I do agree with the in-person piece of this because, 75% of human communication is body language, and you lose so much of that, or up to 70 or 75%, depending on what study you want to use. You lose all that in Zoom, right? Or on an email, or when people are doing their social media roaring, whatever behind the keyboard. So people need to feel like they can trust their elected officials, right? And that if they do show up and they are part of a conversation, and to have that accountability to show that something's going to happen with whatever it is that they brought up. And the only way that I know to do that is really just one conversation at a time, right? And trying to scale that somehow. I love the concept of the NACs in the city, right? I would love to see these community, focused groups throughout District 2. So, you got neighborhoods coming together. Not every neighborhood has the same challenges or opportunities, right?
Agreed.
And so as a council member, as an elected official, I have to figure out how to represent all that diversity of perspectives, right? What Mount Airy is concerned about and is going to be very different than what Urbana, a modern planned community, is going to be thinking about, right? There's a lot of federal workers there. It's very different. So getting out into those communities and being available and being responsive, right? I've heard from folks in the community, they've sent emails and they don't get responses, right? There's also a challenge with how the council is staffed. I worked on Howard County Council. I was a special assistant to a council member there, and I've seen how constituent work can be done. You do need to have the right staffing model to support that, to really do the community outreach that I would want to do. But, there's no panacea, right? There's no silver bullet. Some of it has to do with rebuilding trust in the institution of government, which, at every level of government, we have challenges there, right? And just showing up and being there and maybe trying to find those surrogates across different parts of the community and leaning on them to create those spaces for conversations, and then taking those conversations and turning it into problem solving.
The constituent services is a big part of it. You know, they, in the new budget, they added a person, because there's only one person right now. They're adding a second person for constituent services for the county council. And the Republicans put in an amendment to get rid of that second person, going, hey, whatever, I don't know, I don't remember if it was like 80,000 or 100,000, whatever the cost of this person was, and going, that's waste. And I cannot imagine the avalanche of things that the one person is dealing with right now, and how important it probably is to, you said special assistant to a council member, right? So in Howard County, what I'm hearing is that each person had somebody.
Yes, they have 5 council members, and each of them appoints their own special assistant to help with legislative priorities, to go to the neighborhood meetings and represent and to bring back things that are happening in the community, and to respond, right? Like, I was responding to, somebody that was trying to put up a fence, and they were trying to figure out what are the requirements, right? And then I was able to connect them to the right county department, so that they could, or, housing issues were a big one, right? Like, so people would write into us and they would say, look, my neighbor, we don't think that they're complying with some of the zoning requirements. They're having this type of housing. You pass that on to the housing director, and you follow up and you make sure that that's getting addressed. That takes time.
Yeah.
It takes energy, and it takes some systems thinking too, right? Because these aren't siloed things that need to be solved. Sometimes you need multiple departments to come together.
It is I've tried not to use these conversations to merely lobby for the things I want, but one of the things I want is some kind of navigator. Yeah. That in the city, during the city election, I was calling it a quality of life director for the city. That there's somebody that you can call, that you can say, how do I navigate toward, I need to interact with the local government to accomplish this thing. Who do I talk to? And there's so much there's some people that navigate it very well because it's their job to, right? I'm always reminded of a story, a friend of mine who was a permit coordinator for a very large construction company up and down the East Coast. And their job was to go get the permits to happen, but they were not a deeply construction. This wasn't a person whose job was to understand how the construction was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
This person's job was to understand how the offices worked in the various jurisdictions, to meet the people, to have friends inside of them, so that when they needed a permit done, it wasn't 3 weeks, they could get it done today.
Right.
And that the people need someone like that. Now, I know that the legislators are supposed to do that, right? You represent a district, but when you're paid, I don't know what the pay is now, like $30,000 a year. Yeah. It's not a job; it's a part-time job in which you have to do a lot of actual government work. So, where is the layer of? And so, this is what county services are for. I know that this exists inside of the county government, but I think that there should be additional layers. But the fight, as always, is, well, people say that's a waste, and I just disagree entirely.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have capacity to reach the growing population that is Frederick County, right? And we don't. When I worked for the council member in Howard County, we sent a new resident letter, right? We welcomed people to the county, and we let them know if they needed anything, here's how you could get in touch with us. And that's the kind of service that I would love to be able to provide, right? I do think that there's probably some, and I'm just going to say it because I'm sure it's going to come up in the conversation anyway, but some way that AI can help navigate, right? Like, put in a prompt. What are you looking for? As long as you have the data, it'll kind of help you go. I find the county website very difficult. Yeah. You have to be an insider to know all of the terminology and the language to be able to find what you need. And when I worked for Howard County Council, I was part of the team that redid the council's website. And we created a search engine for all the legislation, right? And just made the information more accessible and user friendly and accessible to folks with disabilities. And so we need to make things easier, more simplistic. I missed somehow paying my water bill. I got put on some kind of naughty list where I literally had to call in and give my credit card over the phone because they weren't going to allow me to pay online because I got on some kind of naughty list, right? And it's like, well, something just happened with my auto whatever that I had set up, right? And it's not like I, don't intend to pay my water bill here, but you just made it even harder for me because now as a digital person, I have to call and talk to somebody and I have to do it during your business hours. And that is just not life today.
Yeah, I completely agreed with with that, like we talked about that percentage of change, how much change is happening that,
right.
Government and even large companies. So I know you work for one. The larger the institution, the slower.
Oh, it's like molasses.
A cruise ship, right? As opposed to a speedboat. Speedboat, you can just turn right. You're good, right? But for a cruise ship to take a right, it's going to be all right. Well, in 7 hours, we're going to be facing that direction.
Yeah. Well, with AI, we're on the verge of the Titanic hitting the iceberg at this point, is how I see it. It's a huge digital disruption, and it has been. And we didn't consent to the amount of AI that is in our lives and has infiltrated literally every tool, digital or that we use, right? So we do need, and what I do at work is really trying to remove waste from systems so that we can deliver value more quickly and more efficiently, and being good stewards of the taxpayer dollars that fund the organization. And so we do need to streamline. We need to use the scale of technology where we can, but we have to do it ethically and responsibly. And as a society, we don't know what that looks like yet.
Is that a tool that we should be using inside of?
If you're not, you're already behind.
Service?
You're already behind.
I have. So words matter to me, right?
Sure.
And I hate when I get an email. I say this all the time. If I get an email and it's so clearly AI, I don't even want to read it because I just don't. It's not like that person is trying to communicate with me, right? And I haven't, wonderfully, no one has tried texting me yet where I was like, that is definitely AI.
Right.
But the day will come where somebody does that. I'm going to reject it on its face. But large model, large data, how would I say this? Understanding a ton of information quickly is something that AI can do that a human would take a very long time to do it.
Right.
So certainly part of me goes, well, how much trust do I have in the model that it will give me accurate information? There's been all this evidence of, where it didn't know an answer and so it fibbed a little bit. So, but so do humans, right? So we're not going to get perfect from a human being in that place, but there's somebody you can kind of hold accountable for it. So I am a little, again, when it comes to words, I don't want legislation being written by AI and these kind of things. If you go, all right, here's a giant problem, and let the computer work on it for a while to look at its solutions that we then, as humans, go back through and go, okay, well, let's do our research and figure that out. I'm okay with that, but I'm sadly, I think I'm agreeing with you that it's if it's kind of we're already there,
right.
Meaning that the resource management of our society is being controlled outside of human hands, and that the governments are very, very far behind, but they're also far behind regulating it.
Yes.
I know that this conversation gets very convoluted with the building of data centers and such and the regulation of that, which Frederick County has been doing for a long time. But I'm talking about the actual regulation of the use. So I'm assuming we would need some kind of policy inside of the government, right? Because if you're a county council member, you say, hey, these people came to me and go, we got this problem in this neighborhood and I want to think about it. And you're putting that into a
So there's
AI
private AI
model.
and there's public AI, right? So organizations create private AI and they feed it their proprietary information so that they can make better decisions and use it for whatever use cases they are trying to solve for, right? And so, look, I didn't consent to the amount of AI in my life, right?
Sure.
There are certain things where it can be helpful. We have to have the right guardrails. And a few years ago, I asked Alexa who all the presidential nominees were, and they left out Hillary Clinton, right?
Yeah.
And you hear how Alexa was originally created. Well, it was created by men.
Yep.
Right? And so you have to think about the fact that whoever is creating the AI, their inherent biases are built in those responses that you're getting from the prompts that you're putting in. And there's no governance. It's the wild, wild west, right? We're trusting these companies, and I say that very loosely,
We're being
be
forced
responsible.
to trust these companies.
Right. And this is why I do support the federal legislation that is being advocated for around, the use of AI and how it's proliferating in our society and the data centers that are being put up, right? As a consumer protection advocate, I worked at the Indiana Attorney General's office investigating real estate licensees and appraisers, people who were defrauding folks trying to buy homes, right? These costs are being passed on to consumers and to ratepayers, and we didn't ask for this. That's not fair. We need some consumer protection guardrails around these things. And so there has been, some attempts but we're so behind in all of this. There's tons of projects across the U.S. in the pipeline, right, for building the infrastructure to support this. And there's also, I work in the tech industry, and so it's my job to follow the trends. There are conversations that companies are having about their org charts and AI agents being part of the org chart.
Yeah.
I mean, those things are happening now and have been happening. So government, this is what I mean, government has to do a better job at keeping pace with the rate of change. If we're not, then we're not going to be able to effectively serve the people we intend to represent. That servant leadership, however good it is, isn't going to matter because we've lost sort of what the context is, right, in which we all live.
Yeah.
So
It really is permeated everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, if you call up, your bank and it's the automated, it used to be that it would be like a prompt and, there were 6 possible answers and it was just waiting for you to say one of them. But that's not the case anymore. It is an AI agent now.
Right.
So you are interacting with this on just 1,000. You go to the grocery store and that computer that you're interacting with in front of you, there is some level of large language model learning happening about what you've bought before and the reason why that coupon pops out of the thing is because the AI has said, I think that this person would buy this yogurt, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, we as humans are just not designed, is probably a way of saying it, by millions and millions and millions of evolution that had nothing to do with this to operate inside of this space. Mm-hmm. And a big part of it to me is how much information comes in. Mm-hmm. And that it's just overwhelming, and that we have no capacity to sift through it to get, was that true, was that true, was that true? And so these things just stick in our brain that happen that we didn't critically think about it. It just was blasted into my face.
Right.
And it's now salient to me. I think it is true because I was told this thing, but I don't really know how or why.
Right.
I feel like when we were young, there was this like, oh, you read it on the internet, so it's not true.
Right.
And now it's that's where truth comes from,
right.
is what my friend posted. So how do you intend to, if you are, as you said, blessed to represent the people in District 2, how will you navigate this kind of post-truth world that's, you have the President of the United States getting up and saying something that is like on its face. He could be standing up there wearing a blue suit and go, my green suit. And everyone goes, well, it's not the only thing you said today, So how would you navigate that? Because again, you're responsible for tax dollars. It means our resources,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
So how will you navigate a post-truth world?
Well, you kind of have to. I remember the card catalog, right?
Yeah.
When I was writing a paper, it must have been elementary, I don't know, about President Eisenhower. And so I remember going to the card catalog and trying to find all of my sources cited, right? Mm-hmm. And we have to sort of get back to everything has become so complex and overly complicated. We've got to get back to some simple things around, where does our information come from? How do we make sure that it's a source that's cited, right? So we have a lot of great research organizations out there, assuming they continue to be funded, right? That we can go to those primary sources. We, it comes back to governance, right? So if you're feeding information, if you're feeding the data to the model that's going to spit out their responses, right? Now they're starting, some of these AI responses are including the sources that they've cited. So we all have to become better digital citizens and take responsibility for the information that we're consuming and fact check it, right?
That is that's an incredibly important point, that idea of digital literacy. There's some wonderful work happening. Actually, you mentioned Urbana from Dr. Kumar, and some people that are, they have like middle school and high school kids that are meeting with our, parents and grandparents' generations to teach them. Well, that's a fraud. That's a lie.
Right.
Like that email it's not what it actually says.
I don't know. Do you remember Snopes?
Of course, yes. This idea we used
we
to go somewhere.
Snopes.
Yes, but it would be the world's largest website now.
Yeah,
right?
I know.
You know what I mean? They would not be able to handle it.
Right.
But that idea of the generation of kids that are born into this, who are digital natives, right? So we are. Somebody used the term. Digital immigrants was what somebody said to me.
Well, I'm an elder millennial, so like I remember I did the before and the after.
That's what I said, digital immigrants. So we immigrated into this digital world, but the kids that are kids now, like your kids, are they don't know the world prior to this digital space, and that how important it is that we are educating, because we're about to have a ton of retired persons in Frederick County who. Not only is it an infrastructure question, transportation issue, doctors' offices, hospitals, all the health, all the stuff that we need to prepare for that. But another thing we need to prepare for is the billions of dollars of senior fraud that goes on.
That's right.
Right? My grandfather, years ago, before he passed, he gets some call from somebody saying, "Hey, it's your grandson David, and I'm in a jail, and that's why it sounds weird, and I need you to give me $200."
Oh yeah.
And he, in his late 90s, still had the wherewithal to call me and go, David, are you in a jail somewhere? He still, but all it took was him not knowing to call me first.
Right.
And frankly, that came out of a conversation prior where we said, hey, don't just believe everybody.
That's right.
So it is kind of incumbent, and I think a role of government to say, I don't know, set up digital literacy camps,
Sure.
like, go through a couple of questions, and but I think it also it's a constant thing that we just in our society we need to remind each other.
The way that folks are defrauded changes. I went through an experience myself where I literally thought the sheriff's department, the sheriff's office was calling me about my jury duty.
Oh, yes.
And they were asking me to meet them somewhere and take them a certain amount of money. And I was admittedly like almost bought into it. And my husband's like, what are you, this is not right. And we both come from like that consumer protection, Federal Trade Commission background. Like I've taken complaints from victims of identity theft, people who have been defrauded, these seniors that you're talking about. I myself, with the education that I have, right, the privilege that I've had to be educated in the way that I have, I was even on the verge of being taken advantage of, right? It is such a psychological game, and it's really difficult to prepare people for that. But we have to try, and that's where, if a council member any good council member should have a great newsletter, right? If those things are happening, you should be letting your folks know in the community what to look out for and who to reach out to if something does happen, like the Attorney General's office, right? They have a consumer protection division, and it's their role to support folks.
This goes back to one of my favorite phrases, that sunlight is the greatest disinfectant.
100%. I say that all the time.
Yeah, that the more light, the more information we have, the stronger our brains are that give back. So,
and I would say that's true for government too, right? So you mentioned our tax dollars. We are accountable to where those tax dollars get spent. And when I talk to folks at the door, they don't have a clear line of sight of where their money is going. So we need to add a little bit more sunlight to that and help them understand the services that are being paid for and what that return on the investment is, right? Your house, if we need more nurses for school, right? Or if we have a need for more fighters, right? These are the things that we need to sort of connect more directly to folks so that they know what the money is that they're getting.
Yeah, I don't know what the cost would be, but maybe a great idea would be some kind of, everybody gets a little balance sheet that says, all right, you pay this amount in taxes, and this amount of dollar went to paying firefighter salaries, and this amount of dollars went to firefighter, equipment, and this amount of dollars went to making sure that we had, the food inspectors went around and made sure.
Yeah.
This amount went to making sure building inspected. This amount went to, constituent services. All these other things that maybe there would be some kind of, but nobody would read it. And I apologize for my.
It's okay.
That's I would. Right,
sure.
I somebody, I
well,
sent a
do.
61-page document. I'm like, I'm
well
read
taken.
It.
We've got to get back to civic engagement, right? So helping people at a very early age understand what that is and what that looks like. And that's why I love Girl Scouts so much. And I'm a troop leader now for my daughters, and we have a Daisy troop. And those early leadership learnings, entrepreneurship, what it means to serve your community, be a Girl Scout to be a sister to every Girl Scout, all of these values that you learn. I took them to the Burl Farm so that they know that their food does not come from Instacart, because literally that is what kids are saying. That we are so far removed from reality, and we've got to reconnect folks to the root of where our food comes from. Where does the paper plate that's on, that your food is sitting on, all of those things, where do these things come from, and what's the cost, right? Yeah. And we did an eco badge, and we made insect motels, and, we brought recycled materials. Like, these are the things that, we just need to have kids learning these things early, right? Because it's hard to do that when folks are older.
So it sounds like you enjoy your job, that you have this lovely family with your kids, and you're enjoying Girl Scouts and all these things. Why politics? Why walk away from that beautiful, wonderful thing that you could do all day and just go, well, I'm going to go spend a couple hours being yelled at by.
Well, they're not separate in my mind. Those lived experiences are, in my opinion, valuable for the decisions that we have to make in this moment of history. So my tech background, my awareness around big critical infrastructure projects like trains and I just spent time at the wheel shop. I saw how the wheels come back and get repurposed so that they can go back to get passengers where they need to go, get people to more places. And, just this lens of having more accessibility within our community. My daughter, depending on which playground she goes to, it's not something that she can actually play at because the surface is uneven. She has ataxic cerebral palsy. And so just having mulch on a playground is problematic for her. And just some of the ways that the equipment is constructed is not safe for her. And there's no adaptive swings at a lot of... Sophia Madigan's playground is the ideal in my mind. I love that place.
First time in my life I was introduced. I've driven past it, but I actually went to this with a child. It wasn't just me. And I was like, oh my God, because you can like turn things and large things move, and it's like an interactive space as opposed to this just like static thing.
Yeah.
But very accessible.
Right.
And very agreed. The ground
surface is steady, and they have the swings that can come over you so that it's more protective, right, for people who have different abilities. And I have to give a huge shout out to Frederick City Parks and Rec, because they are doing an amazing job getting focused on accessible playgrounds. Emily is on the Special Education Citizens Advisory Committee that I am wrapping up my chairship at the end of this month of, but she is a huge advocate, and I want to pick her brain for what we can do in the county, because they're doing something right there.
Yeah, and there are tons and tons of parks that people just don't, tucked away places, and there's just like hundreds all over that we really don't, not everybody is kind of aware of. But so talk for a second about that relationship between the city and the county, because as a city resident, there is certainly a perception that the city is handling most of the burden of the taxes, but we're not getting the same kind of services. So how do you have that relationship or that conversation between, you have people that, the kind of the farther out from that city center it's going to be, the more cost the infrastructure gets, right? So how is that, right? Do you feel it's a good relationship? Do you feel
I can't really speak to City of Frederick, but the municipalities in District 2. Yeah. So there's Mount Airy, right, which is like 4 different counties. So that's very complicated.
It's a weird space.
And then Newmarket, right, is a municipality in District 2. So I would be looking to understand, what some of those pain points are, and digging a little bit deeper and seeing how we can strengthen partnerships and have how do we understand each other's vision and find some common ground, right? Yeah. And really, to me, it's about the people, right? What do the people want? And we're there as elected officials. We should be the conduit to what those one's needs and desires are, right? And you have to do that in a way that helps, the majority. You're not going to be able to solve all the things. That's just not practical. That's not reality. But the 80-20 rule, right? Where you can get the highest and best use of the tax dollars to serve the most people, right? How do we kind of look at it that way? And what are the core set of infrastructure and services that government should be providing? Safety, security, food, water, getting from A to B, right? Yeah. All these things so that we can thrive, right? That's what we all want to thrive, and we all want to have this sense of community, and that's what I would be looking to do.
There certainly is, and it's not just inside the city, but there's so many what they call Alice households, right? So people that are just living right there on the edge. And I think about this a lot, that the majority of people are just, they're drowning, they're buried, and every day they're just trying to keep their head above water, and they don't have the time and the capacity to think about those bigger and broader things. Capacity isn't the right word, because they could, but they don't have the time to sit and think about those things, and just how important it is that we have legislators and representatives for us, both in the city and the county and at the state and obviously at the federal level, that are paying attention to what's actually happening inside the community and dealing with that. Because one of the things I think about when I look at my ballot is, from the bottom to the top, virtually every single person is a homeowner, right? Which, we have a lot of homeowners. Frederick County is a majority owner-occupied a place. But there are a ton of people that don't. And that it kind of bothers me that essentially none of my representation is a renter.
Yeah.
Nobody has that lived experience. And as much as
I do.
So,
I was a renter
so,
almost 7-8 years ago. And I saw what that was and how hard that was. And I empathize. Like the amazing stylist that I have at DNA in Urbana, she was telling me she lives in Brunswick, right? And so their rent was going up. And so they literally got a different apartment in the same complex so that they could avoid that rent hike. So we need to figure out a different way to solve for this. She also wants to buy a house.
Yeah.
And that's very expensive. I'm priced out of my own community in Urbana Highlands, right? We bought our house, I don't know, a little over 7 years ago, just before the girls were born. And it was $450, whatever it was. The houses in my community are going to like 700 something.
Yeah.
Like, I can't afford that.
Well, I'm a big advocate for making it illegal for people to look at Zillow. Because I think that colors their perspective so much that there's this idea of wealth, but it's like, but where would you move?
Yeah,
right?
You can't.
I sell my house. I have my house is probably 60% more valuable now than when I bought it 10 years ago. Right? Same as you. I would have never bought that house 10 years now. Now, 10 years later,
Even if I could afford it, I would rather put that money somewhere else.
Correct. So it's not real value.
Right.
Because
speculation.
Exactly. And yet those same people will complain about property taxes. So they'll say, oh, my property taxes are so high. But they're also very happy that their houses are worth so much. So how do you have that conversation with people that, it seems to me a lot of the focus is how do we get our property taxes down? I want the same services. I want more services. I want when I call up, I want somebody to answer the phone. When I have a fire, I want firefighters to show up. I want all the things that I still want, but I don't want my taxes to be as high as they are.
Yeah.
So people introduce things like senior tax credits and such, which, I want, being very clear here, I want people that have lived here for a long time to be able to afford to live here.
Yeah, to age in place.
But if we make it easier on people, I think one of the Republican candidates, maybe for county executive, not for county council, was saying that we should stop, that after you've owned your home for a certain amount of time, you shouldn't have to pay property tax anymore. And the idea being, so what's going to happen is you're shifting the burden of us existing from the people that have had their houses for forever to the people that are buying their houses, right? So now the impact fees have to go up.
Yeah.
Now the cost of that initial home is going to go up. So you're building this giant wall that's preventing people from buying a home or even renting at a reasonable rate because we have all this wealth that's just stored inside of these spaces. So it's not in their best interest of the people that have lived there for 30 years to vote for people and policies that help out new homeowners. How do we convince them that it is good?
I think it goes back to the why and the accountability to how the tax dollars are being spent. And there's such a lack of trust in the institution of government, again, at every level. And so we've got to figure out how to build that trust back. And there is a Republican candidate that talks about a hierarchy of needs. I'd like to understand a little bit more what they mean by that at some point. But all of us, we need a house over our head, right? We need some kind of housing, and we need to build smaller housing. We need to build more housing that's near transportation, transit-oriented development. We need to build housing that is more inclusive, having separate senior communities. I don't know if that's the best pattern, right? Like, have folks live together and reflect the community, right?
Yeah.
And then there is a development in downtown Rockville that has disabled folks and non-disabled folks, and they live together in a community and they help one another. Yeah. I want to see more of that. I
saw a great example of it was like a retirement home and a kindergarten and pre-K like 0 to 3 childcare.
Right.
And the elderly people that lived in the retirement home, they spent all day hanging out with the kids.
How amazing is that?
And they were doing shared activities and stuff and all these things. And it's just this, okay, we have this space. Yeah. We have adults that care, and you certainly need for safety. You need to have other people around. It's not just, but it just seemed to me, to your point, they're a model of, well, just because we do things a certain way doesn't mean we need to keep doing them.
Right. And we have these senior centers, which are great, but can we have community centers that are for everyone, right?
Indeed.
And I was just talking to somebody the other day, 40-year media specialist, and she just wants a place to go and do her quilting. And she talked about a place in Howard County, more of a community-oriented space that she'd like to see more here in the county, right?
She doesn't want to sit on her couch and flip through Facebook.
No, she wants to get together with her, her gal friends and do some quilting because she's retired and she's earned that. And she wants to do it in a community space.
So speaking of doing things differently than we've done, so here's a question for you. Give me an example of a mistake you've made, and how did you get through that? How did you navigate that? I've had some people say they didn't make mistakes, which I didn't believe them. But give me an example of where you learned.
Gosh, I don't even know where to start, because if you aren't making mistakes, you're not learning. And I view myself as a continuous learner, a lifelong learner. There's definitely been things in career that I would probably, if I had to do all over again, would not have done. There's some things in career are, you're brought in and your role isn't very clear. And so then you have somebody else that's brought in and they think that their role is your role. And then you have this conflict, right? So having more of a getting ahead of that so that it doesn't turn into something that it doesn't have to. I've definitely had that in my career not too long ago. But yeah, I've made mistakes with Girl Scouts. They've got a pretty solid and rightfully so policy around pictures and what you do with those pictures and that kind of thing. And I mistakenly posted something of one of the girls, and I took it down because I didn't realize my co-troop leader had handled all the documentation. I didn't do the due diligence to go look at it myself, and I learned a very hard lesson from that and was totally mortified and very apologetic, and will never do that again because online privacy for children is so important. And that was a very recent mistake.
All right, so juxtaposition. Tell me something you're proud of.
I am most proud probably of just being there to support my girls, and especially Marin, who, as we're navigating the IEP world, it's very difficult. It's very complex. I'm a certified paralegal, and even I have trouble understanding the law, the IDEA, that tells you what your rights are as a parent to advocate for your child and their IEP situation. So just instead of sort of letting that get me down or being a victim of it, I turned that into advocacy. And so I went to the Rights Law Conference and I learned about special education law. I decided, I got a random email from the school system saying, hey, there's this CCAC, this Special Education Advisory Committee, and they're seeking members. So I became a member and nobody wanted to chair it. And then I became the chair, and here we are. And for the first time ever, there was a contested election for who was going to be the chair, which we just held yesterday. And then I'm also part of the ARC Maryland's Partners in Policymaking class, because I am a big systems thinker. I want to see, what does this look like at the county, state, and federal level? And then how do we bring these different perspectives together? What problems do we need to solve? And then how do we get people to come together to solve those problems?
Oh, wonderful. Well, how do people get a hold of you?
I can be found at jamieshopland.com or info@jamieshopland.com, JAMIESHOPLAND, and it's that simple.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you.